Morning, sir.
Good
And
morning,
it's
Surajit.
always a pleasure and an honor to share the dais with you. I think your experience or expertise in the BFSI segment has been an immense contribution, I think, to the entire sector. And I'm sure that audience, which includes myself, will definitely take away a lot of inputs to this session. So I think since we have a hard stop, I think we should start, right?
Sure.
So I think the a few set of questions what we have planned for this fireside chat is would be revolving around the data center infrastructure and your thoughts on this sector. Data center continues to be a very critical ingredient into the entire BFSI sector, and it has its various shapes and forms, how it plays its role. So I think starting on, how do you see data centers playing a very crucial role in BFSI, to sustain, enhance the business operations?
See, I think data centers are always going to be the integral part of the infrastructure for any enterprise, not just the BFSI. And as the digitization is growing and as more and more automation, AI, and more technology enablement of the business services is happening, so there is definitely, the data centers are going to be in a huge demand in terms of not just, kind of a house of, you can call it the technology equipment, means all the technology stack, be it is a, entire network, servers, storage, everything, but also, looking at the resiliency and fault tolerance for making the entire digital transformation to work in a resilient fashion. The data centers, there will be key requirement that they have a multiple level of resiliency, be it is a edge data center, be it is a the various telecom service providers, which are being supported in a resilient fashion from coming from the various unique paths converging into the location. And it is very much contextual for the India specific, because we are a growing country and still a lot of infrastructure is being built and enhanced, and which lot of times leads to, sometimes there are, whatever the previous implementation of the road version 1 finishes, there is another contractor who was supposed to build 1.2, and before 1.2 was 1.0 was itself was delayed, the 1.2 of the road which they have to resurface it, he again digs the road, and again, the another kind of always digging is persistent, here. So that's another which is a big hamper. A lot of large institutions have faced that while the infrastructure improvements are happening, in terms of physical infrastructure across the location where the data center is situated, that impacts the resiliency of the data center, number one. So that it should be design enabled from day one. And as well as when we look at the various utility services, being now we talked about the telecom, the second is the power. And none of the data centers are, in India are tier 4 really. Means nobody has a two different unique power sources, power coming in to their location. They are from mostly they are from the same grid from two different substations. So that is another big area where resiliency is required, and the right level of, in absence of any power, there has to be right level of power failure mechanisms. And then what is the power failure? Whether the power failure is unique to the customer, power failure is depends on the size of the customer. There are many factors. So power is another very big area for resiliency, and there are many sophisticated mechanisms are there nowadays. I think we will not dwell into those details, where it provides those resiliency even in the current context or current scenario where power sources are not from the multiple grids available. So these, I think, two, three things are, definitely the key ingredient. Another one is the PUE, and I was very surprised to talk to some of the regulators and see their observation that earlier the regulators used to talk more about the data center having the right capacity planning and two sources of power or some resiliencies in terms of telecom, etc. Now regulators are getting into the PUE level as well. So they have been now talking about how close the PUE of the data center is to the one, to near 1.0. They are not talking about 1.3, 1.6 will be good. They're talking about how close it is to 103, 106, 1.06 or 1. So that is where another rigor is coming. And tier 4 is now, given the digitization is growing, I think is the key. Even regulators are pushing for that you must be signing up for the tier 3
Sure.
plus or tier 4 data center. So these are the, I think, some of the key ingredients to make the entire ecosystem for right digitization, because we might have designed an excellent application, you might have excellent experience, but at the end, when all this is running out of the servers which are hosted in a house which has various levels of shortcomings in terms of resiliency, we are bound to have various kinds of embarrassments with the regulator, with the customers. So that way, data centers play a very, very major role. And again, just to 10 seconds on this, that I think one question will be there. Now the cloud is there, so whether the data centers will be any longer there or not, I think what is going to be hybrid for good amount of time. Never it is going to be 100% on the public cloud. So hence the data centers are continuing to play a major role for the enterprises. So it is a key ingredient.
Thank you, sir. And it was soothing to hear that. Otherwise, I was getting a little worried with so much of investments already put in. Your hybrid strategy really gives a lot of this thing. But I think, thank you so much. You really have answered, a trend which is there in future. I think I will try to merge some of the questions, because I think when you are answering, you being a veteran, you will cover the right areas. You've been you've been longly associated with a very large bank, and you know how the infrastructure setup is there. Now you're leading country's biggest exchange. Uh, uh, the potential risk as per you and the challenges. There's a lot of governance in the BFSI sector. There's a lot of governance,
Yes.
and uh, every CIO, CTO, have a huge mandate to follow those governance. What do you think? How these risk challenges from governance, from security perspective, very briefly, can be mitigated as per you? What are the few things one should look at?
Yeah, I think, see, one of the key is there as per the regulatory requirement when we look at the various application stack, that data has to be hosted within the physical boundaries of this country. So when the geographic boundaries come in, so definitely the data centers play a major role, that even if you are subscribing for the any kind of a public cloud services, so their data centers must be hosted out of the geographic boundaries of the country. And the second major area comes, that is more on application design, that in terms of data security, that right level of encryption for data at rest, for data in transmission, or data in motion, as well as looking at all the logs which are being made available. They are all encrypted and only available to the right administrators with the right access levels. So access management is also playing a major role. So now for monitoring all this, the SOC, the Security Operations Center component comes into play, where the various network level securities out of the data center, as well as the physical security in the data center, their monitoring, or however that gets normally monitored in the by the or within the BMS zone in most of data center. So there is especially in the BFSI or a highly regulated industry, that plays a very strong component that for a critical large enterprises, they need to have a security operation desk out of the data center to mitigate such kind of risks. And in terms of again further security comes, there's a lot of physical like multiple level of security. Some data centers have like 3 levels of physical security there, from the gate till the your server hall. And similarly the external walls of the data room where your equipments are stored, they should not be facing outside the perimeter of the data center premise. Similarly, on the main gate, various levels of security equipment need to be applied, not just the video cameras and all, but there are borders and various kind of a we should say the various kinds of ammunition resistant walls and construction need to be done. So all that also plays a major role for the data center security. And as I was alluding on earlier, how the resources get allocated, whether it is a cooling or whether it is a the electricity pods to your server hall or your set of area of IT equipment, that also plays a major role. And that could be a threat, whether the distribution, if it is a shared infrastructure, and what if the one particular another tenant is absorbing these resources on a shared basis, what could be knock-on impact. So that also is not a direct security threat, but nowadays those intelligence have still not come in, but there are ways where the systems of the data centers can be hacked to rebalance these kind of a shared physical resources, because all of them are ultimately controlled by the building management system or various kinds of software stack. So how they are being secure, how they are being kept secure within the data center premise or by the data centers service providers, that also is one of the major considerations.
Thank you so much, sir. And you are absolutely right. I think these parameters are very critical. Now, moving on, mm, this space, this sector, this industry, or this asset class has seized a lot of evolvement. I mean, right? And you've been a part of this journey. I mean, from the year 2000 onwards, when the so-called data center started getting built. Today, if you have to look to a data center service provider,
Yes.
what would be your top four ask which needs to be fulfilled? I mean, there would be more, I'm sure, but I think the top four would be very critical for any data center service provider, and it's not to cater to a customer. I think this question is more pointed towards you in terms of from a critical necessity infrastructure which is needed to support. What would be the top four ask?
I think maybe I will be repeating for
Sure.
last my two questions, but I think for the critical financial services or non-financial services enterprises, but they are critical in their own space. It is very necessary that they need to have the dedicated data center space, and that dedicated space for some people, based on their volumes, based on their size, it could be the whole building, it could be the
Floor.
hall, or it could be the even if shared hall, but more dedicated supply or the infrastructure, the services of the data center. Then second comes as I main is the data center services, which are like how, whether the power electricity pod or the cooling is being provided, and as a shared basis or dedicated basis. There
Sure.
are a lot of data center service providers are now available, where at a floor level or at a server hall level, they have a provision where they can dedicate the, and uh, resilient infrastructure services, be it as a electricity, power, cooling, you know, and monitoring for the BMS and security services, and what level of resiliency they provide, whether they provide n plus one or n plus n. So that also number two is comes into play. So various level of abstract kind of abstractions you can apply on this. Number three comes the telecom, which is that how many telecom service providers are available. Earlier days we used to have one plus one, but based on the criticality, like we in one of my organization we have four levels of telecom service providers for every link. So, and you need to also look that all these service providers are coming from a unique physical path into the data center based on the whatever shortcomings I said in my earlier response. So these are the key three ones. And in terms of fourth is one which is in the cooling, which is again I think coming in a modern data center where I think some of the critical infrastructure, which is like, and high throughput, high volume, especially taking a case of UPI payments in case, like in the BFSI space or in our case, the trading. So people are now looking for the liquid cool data centers. Those will be very, very highly specialized area, but there could be a section of your infrastructure which may require for such data centers. And again, that brings your PUE ratings and all closer to one and all those things which I was talking about. So I think these are the four things I would say are the key.
Thank you so much, and it's really very helpful to understand your thoughts. What are the key factors? Moving on, what is your view? Analytics is becoming very, very pertinent, and it is an area where there's a lot of work is happening and a lot is being seen. How do you see analytics playing a role in critical infrastructure like data centers? What's the future stored there for the data centers in terms of analytics?
Yeah, see, analytics is definitely, I think analytics is got into the every, uh, we should say, the space of every layer and tier of the your technology architecture, whether we say it just pure applications or infrastructure and the data, because there is a correlation from end to end. Like if there is a your BMS systems, has a integration with the network operation center or the overall operation center. So it can, you will come to know, say, your IT equipments are spread across multiple server halls, and in one particular server hall, you have a potential UPS failure is going to, come in, and your failovers, it's like already one, say it is a one plus one, and already one node is failed, and second, you're already running on a failed over node, and that is unfortunately on a rainy day, it is also on the brink of failure. So now, what will be the outages in your this data center? So all that impact analysis proactively you can carry out, based on the integration of your VMS platform with the operation center integration and
Sure.
correlation with that which kind of servers are there, which kind of applications are running, which kind of business services are hosted on out of those servers, and what could be the possible impact. And if I have to take a action, then if I have a active data centers, or if I have a near dia, should I run on that particular very day the operations from the my fail safe location. So these decisions, it helps, all this analytics helps to take that decision right.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think a leading question to this, you just mentioned, how do you see disaster recovery near NDR, near DRs, uh, relevant, pertinent in this sector? Because today, uh, the cost of setting up a data center in India is still very high.
Yes, yes.
Right from sourcing of a land, to sourcing of power, to sourcing of the other infrastructures. It takes a lot amount of time. Do you think from a BFSI sector perspective, DRs and near DRs continue to play a important critical role?
Uh, yes, I think the answer is yes, because again, it depends on how you are using the near DR.
Sure.
Because the minute we say near DR, most of us actually the it rings the bell in our mind that it is going to have a plain vanilla, just a storage where which is going to have the last few hours of data or last few minutes of data to mitigate the data loss to be prevented whenever you switch over to DR. But I think in that context, maybe for a lot of legacy stack of the application, it will come in. But it matters that we have to reimagine the near DRs, and we have to look at the near DR more like a availability zone
Sure.
where for the critical operations. So you may have a near DR as a another active zone
Sure.
in the same region where your production or DR is there. So there is a now there are no longer a concept of three-way data centers or three-way DR. Now it's a four-way DR. Like there is a near DR for a DR as well.
Sure.
So regulators are now going one step ahead. What if you are running from a DR, and if there is a
Down.
outage in the DR, and most of us go to DR for compliance reason, and largely we run from the production, and you go to DR only 2 weeks in a year maximum. And what if those 5 working days there is a outage? So there will be imminent data loss when if you want to switch back to production. So hence actually when we are talking about for the legacy stack, near DR now four-way has to be there, and for the modern stack, and as I think the technical depth of the legacy will be going down, I think the concept is going to be now having a availability zone, which means that you may have a three or four availability zones like any CSP providers, and I think it is going to remain very critical. And apart from availability zone, I think to have a again what level of resiliency in your architecture is being built in. Largely, I think out of the three or four, minimum two availability zone may continue, or if not all, will continue as a active. So you can prevent any imminent failure or any kind of a outage. So that these are the key trends for near DRM.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, these are really very insightful thoughts. Possibly the last question before we can put a few questions on the floor. Your views and thoughts on what is edge? How do we build edge? We all are building core. We all are looking at the major metro markets.
Right.
Now, the telcos have been very, very active in building the edge. The data center, and there's been a lot of talks on the edge.
Yeah.
What's your initial thoughts? I mean, what should be an edge strategy in India for a data center service provider?
I think a lot of us are using implicitly, like we have a CDN subscriptions, and so CDN play a very big role for they can fuel the edge data centers across the country. Number one, and as we are growing the experience, whether it is a retail customer, corporate customer, and we are going towards the instant gratification through the various apps, predominantly all mobile apps only.
Sure.
So to have a various customer analytics, rather than going to the core platforms being made available over the edge. So edge data centers are going to play that major role, and IoT and etc. are also playing a major role
Sure.
in terms of making the customer experience, very very relevant from the reason the device is trying to connect. So I see in those areas for enhancing the experience as well as enhancing the kind of a response to the customer for various that immediately he wants to connect with the business process, and then later on for improving the overall business proficiency, the data can be fetched for having a consistency and all from the core platforms. But immediate gratification, definitely, the edge data centers are going to play major role for such devices.
Thank you so much.